markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Most Asian markets are up on Monday as investors digest U.S. President Donald Trump's latest trade war salvos. This as investors become optimistic on the lingering trade deals. Trump recently threatened to hit the European Union and Mexico with a whopping 30% tariffs after a series of announcements last week, including his warning of 50% levies on copper and Brazilian goods, 35% on Canadian goods, and a possible 200% charge on pharmaceuticals. Both Japan's Nikkei 225 and Australia's ASX 200 are flat with a slight uptick, while the rest are in positive territory. In the currency markets, the US dollar is flat against the Japanese yen, the Hong Kong dollar, and Thai baht, but it appreciates against the South Korean won and Singapore dollar. The Australian dollar, meanwhile, depreciates against the greenback. In commodities, gold prices are up by nearly 0.2%, and oil markets also up. In the cryptocurrency space, Bitcoin climbs almost 3%, while Ethereum surges by more than 1%. U.S. President Donald Trump is bent on pursuing his trade war with other countries as the August 1st deadline for his tariffs approaches.
Our country made $25 billion last month, $25 billion. It hasn't done that in a long time, and a lot of that's done because of good management, and number one, and maybe even more importantly, the tariffs that are pouring in. We have tariffs pouring in at levels that we have never seen before, and they've only just started. That's really a small portion. It's mostly from cars and aluminum and steel, a little bit of lumber. But they'll really start in about another week. And then in about a month, they'll come in at levels that are extremely strong.
The president also lashed out at countries that have allegedly maintained closed markets while benefiting from access to the U.S.
We're dealing with other countries and certain countries that would rather have a deal than a regular tariff. And we're willing, if they're willing to open up. These are countries that have been shut to us, but we've been open to them. In other words, they wouldn't let us do business there, but they would do business in our country. Not a fair deal. So the European Union is talking to us. They want to open up their country. I would say Japan to a much lesser extent in terms of opening up their country. Japan, as you know, and we're very close to Japan, but they sell us millions and millions of cars a year. We sell them no cars because they won't accept our cars. And they won't accept much of our agriculture either. So
the Philippine government is optimistic that it can convince Washington to lower its tariff rate on Philippine goods ahead of President Trump's August 1 deadline. President Bongbong Marcos is flying to the U.S. next week to meet with Trump. This week, Trade Secretary Cristina Roque and Presidential Economic Advisor Frederick Go will also fly to the U.S. to hold more negotiations with officials. Aside from trying to bring down the tariffs, they will also push for a free trade agreement with the U.S. Trump raised the tariff on Philippine goods from 17 to 20%. China's exports gained momentum in June while imports rebounded. This as companies rush to deploy shipments with a fragile tariff truce between Washington and Beijing in effect. Businesses are anxiously waiting if the world's two largest economies can reach a trade agreement. Customs data on Monday showed outbound shipments from China rose 5.8% year-on-year in June. This is higher than a 5% forecast in a Reuters poll of economists. Analysts caution Beijing could be indirectly hurt by U.S. pressure on third countries used heavily for transshipments of Chinese goods. Trump had recently unveiled a 40% tariff on U.S.-bound transshipments through Vietnam. President Bongbong Marcos has the authority to grant tax benefits power rate discounts and other incentives to qualified investors in support of national economic development. That's according to Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla, who clarified in a legal opinion that doing so does not violate the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. His opinion was issued in response to a request from Finance Secretary Ralph Recto, who sought clarification on the President's authority under Section 301 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997. That provision allows the President to extend budgetary support to private entities undertaking highly desirable projects. It also empowers him to modify the mix, period, or manner of availment of incentives or to craft appropriate fiscal and non-fiscal support packages for such projects. The British Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines gives the Marcos administration a score of 8 out of 10 for its economic performance. In an interview on BNC's Business 360, the Chamber's Executive Vice Chairman Chris Nelson said they are satisfied with the government's success in taming inflation, having an open communication with business sectors, and progress in cutting red tape.
I would give it an 8, ocho. I think it is done very well, particularly with inflation. And we've seen inflation now, I think the last report was 1.4%. That actually is a significant achievement. On other aspects, obviously they would like to have higher GDP numbers. Currently, I think they're looking at 5.6. But overall, Robert, yes, it's a good performance, particularly on inflation and giving scope for further rate cuts by the Banco Central.
As the president is expected to report on the state of the country's economy in his upcoming SONA, the chamber wants to hear progress on speeding up the ease of doing business and the passage of key bills like the Cybersecurity and E-Governance Acts. Nelson hopes the Marcos administration will ease restrictions on foreign ownership to attract more investors. Energy Regulatory Commission Chairperson Monalisa Dimalanta has resigned. This was confirmed by the Presidential Communications Office today. Her term was supposed to end by 2029. Dimalanta's departure comes just days after two other commissioners, Alexis Lumbatan and Catherine Maceda, retired on July 10 upon completing their 7-year terms. With only 2 commissioners remaining out of the 5-member board, the agency now lacks quorum to decide on major rulings on power issues. There was no word from Malacanang on whether President Marcos has accepted Dimalanta's resignation or if replacements for the vacant posts will be named soon. Let's get the reaction of the National Association of Electricity Consumers for Reforms Incorporated. Joining us on the line is NASICOR President Pete Ilagan. Mr. Ilagan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mai, and good afternoon to all your viewers, and thank you for having me in your program.
Glad to have you here, sir. So what can you say about the resignation of ERC Chair Monalisa Dimalanta? We heard it was announced just this morning during the flag-raising ceremony.
Well, we're quite surprised, but to us, this is a very welcome development. As we all know, from the very beginning, NASICOR was of the position that her appointment was marred with concerns of conflict of interest because of her role as the former Chief Legal Counsel and Compliance Officer of the Aboitiz Power Corporation, which we know is one of the dominant players in the energy sector, which she was tasked to regulate.
And also, but we must note as well that the ERC is among the agencies that was furnished with a memorandum by Malacanang to submit their mandatory or mandated submission of courtesy resignations as part of the ongoing reboot of the Marcos administration.
Yes.
Yes, and now her resignation now leaves the agency without quorum, and the ERC cannot decide on power-related issues. Now, how big of a problem is this for consumers?
Well, if the vacant positions will not be filled up in a month or two, the remaining commissioners will really be confronted with that big problem of resolving so many pending issues, applications that would require immediate resolutions. That would be a very, very big problem that they will be confronted with. So we are urging Malacanang to fill up the 3 vacancies as soon as possible in order for the commission to be able to do its task of regulating the industry. Otherwise, we may have a very chaotic power industry.
Are there pending issues that the ERC has yet to decide on?
Come again, Mia?
Mai, sir. Are there other pending issues that the ERC has yet to decide on?
Plenty, Mai. Applications for power supply agreements, applications for capital expenditures project of the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, Meralco, and the other private distribution utilities. There are actually 141 distribution utilities, all of which have capital expenditure applications. This is too big a task for the Commission. And if they won't have the quorum, this is going to be a very big problem in delivering the public service that distribution utilities and the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines are tasked to do. This is going to be a very big problem. That's why there is an urgent sense of urgency on the part of Malacanang to fill up these vacant positions at the Energy Regulatory Commission as soon as possible.
Is there? Do you have any other appeal to President Marcos aside from the urgency of filling up these vacant positions?
Well, we would like to urge the president to appoint someone who is totally independent and a credible leader, someone who can champion consumer protection, transparency, and fair regulation, which is sorely needed in the power industry. Someone who can restore public confidence in the Energy Regulatory Commission so that the people can expectedly put their trust once again in the Energy Regulatory Commission.
So these are the qualities you are looking for when we talk about a possible successor to Monalisa Dimalanta.
Yes, specifically for the chairperson. We urge the president to fill up such position as soon as possible in order to restore public confidence in the task that is mandated upon this commission.
All right, Mr. Ilagan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
That was NASICOR President Pete Ilagan. We're taking a short break. More business stories are coming up next. You're watching Business Group. The Philippines has suspended the importation of mackerel and torpedo scad just days after issuing new guidelines allowing the entry of 25,000 metric tons of fish. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel issued a memorandum order on July 8, halting the inclusion of mackerel and torpedo scad from the list of species eligible for import. He says smuggling and misdeclaration issues prompted him to issue the suspension. The imports aim to address potential shortfalls in the country's fish supply. President Bongbong Marcos leads the groundbreaking ceremony for the construction of the new Caticlan passenger terminal building at Caticlan Airport in Aklan. The project aims to boost regional connectivity, tourism, and economic growth. Marcos says the government continues to lay the foundation for its policy of opening more parts of the country to international travelers without requiring them to pass through Manila. Once operational, the terminal will be able to process up to 3,000 passengers at a time, with a projected annual capacity of 7 million passengers. It is set to be completed by 2027. Fuel prices are expected to rise following 2 consecutive weeks of rollbacks. The cost of diesel may soar by up to 1 peso and 50 centavos per liter starting tomorrow, July 15th. Gasoline might go up by 60 centavos to 80 centavos per liter. The expected hike is driven by strong fuel demand, which has outweighed the effects of increased supply. Fuel retailers say renewed Houthi attacks in the Red Sea and concerns over potential impacts from new U.S. tariffs are also contributing to the upward pressure on oil prices. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is committed to addressing global excess steel capacity in cooperation with China. He gave the assurance during a meeting with business leaders from Australia and China in Shanghai. This comes amid growing complaints from several countries that a flood of cheap Chinese steel is hurting their local industries. China's strong steel exports have partly made up for weakening domestic demand.
While government has an important role to play, we know it will be industry that drives the major developments to decarbonise the sector. The Australian government is committed to supporting these industry-led efforts.
U.S. President Trump is optimistic that a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas militants in Gaza will be reached this week. Trump has proposed a 60-day truce that will include a phased release of Hamas hostages, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from parts of Gaza, and it also includes talks to end the conflict. The Palestinian death toll from the war has already passed 58,000, according to Gaza's health ministry. Israel's latest attack on Sunday left at least 95 dead. We're taking a short break. More business stories are up next. You're watching Business Brief. Philippine shares bouncing back into the 6,500 level after closing in positive territory in the first trading day of the week. The PSE index ended higher with more than 1% to close at 6,525, finishing the day as the best performer in Asia. All the sectoral indices ended in the green, with mining and oil rising the most at nearly 3%. Advancers and decliners are in a deadlock at 97 to 97. Total value turnover reached 6.5 billion pesos. Majority of the day's most active stocks ended in the green, with JG Summit rising the most at more than 6%. Meanwhile, the foreign exchange market, the peso, is currently trading at 56.62 against the greenback, depreciating from the previous close of 56.47. That's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again next week as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. See you then.